the BizTech's Technology Show. Our guest for today is Julio Bermúdez, the Vice President of Asia Pacific at Amplitude. Now, Amplitude is a product intelligence platform that provides digital product tools that help teams run and grow their businesses. Now, the company is a brain behind more than 45,000 digital products and over 1,000 enterprise customers, out of which 23 out of the Fortune 100 companies use them. Now, helping them innovate faster and smarter. Now, Julio, that sounds very impressive. Welcome to the show and give us an overview of Amplitude and its history.
Yeah, so Amplitude was founded by Spencer Skates and two other co-founders. In fact, two of them went to MIT, and they are pretty incredible engineers. And they have a wonderful story I highly recommend looking up. But to cut it a little bit short, they actually started going through Y Combinator, an accelerator that has created companies like Airbnb and Dropbox and things like that. They quickly realized that this product they were trying to build, they couldn't understand what was happening inside of it. They could understand how to get people to the product. They understood ad tech. They understood all these things, but they couldn't actually see what was happening inside the product. And they built a tool to help them. And everybody started being like, hey, can I use that too? And that's when they realized they needed to pivot the company to building a product analytics company. And so from then, we really have just grown, pretty exponentially and pretty incredibly. Obviously culminated with our direct listing last year. And now we're in even better position to, really attack this at a global scale. And that's kind of what we're doing out here with our presence in Asia. So again, to kind of put it in a nutshell, what Amplitude does is help companies build better products. We help them be able to understand how customers are behaving in their products in order to better serve them through marketing channels, through product development. What should I build? As well as really help understand what is actually driving revenue. And it's pretty amazing that over the past, couple of years, past half decade, we've poured about $1.3 trillion, right, as humanity into digital products. And a lot of people don't actually know how their products are actually working inside. And so that's a huge market opportunity for us. And we're pretty excited about it. And we're definitely very excited about Asia.
Julio, you brought a very interesting point up because, I think I read a statistic that I think 68% of venture capital money actually goes into Facebook, Google, Amazon advertising.
Yeah.
And most of them basically don't really know what really works from a translation to sales and what really doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. The way to grow your business, whether you're venture backed or even if you're like a traditional bank, is to of course start through advertising and social channels and things like that. And we're spending a lot of money. In fact, we have been for 2 decades now. Just throwing money at this problem of how to get people to my website, how to get people to my digital app. But you're right, like people don't understand what happens after they acquire the customer. So, if I'm Grab or if I'm somebody, I spend all this money, I give away a coupon just to get someone to, download my app. Once they're inside my app, it's very hard to understand what is actually driving sales and how do I actually go from net negative on that acquisition to net positive. And that's a huge challenge. And especially, I think now we're seeing markets really wake up to that with even just the change in transposition evaluations of tech and digital products in terms of now not just looking at how fast are you growing, but actually are you making money? And we're well positioned to help companies actually make that transition successfully.
Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we speak about some of your offerings. But tell us about Amplitude's presence in Asia Pacific. What's your go-to-market strategy and who are you targeting in terms of customers in this region?
Yeah, so we really are looking for people that are building digital products or are looking at digital products as a way to really start either driving revenue, like that's one of their main revenue drivers, or they're looking at it for growth, right? And the pandemic really accelerated a lot of that. If you were a bank, you used to be able to rely on getting people into your branches all of a sudden that was just completely cut. You had to, have a digital experience in order for you to even monetize or communicate with your customers. And so that accelerated a lot of things. But yeah, in essence, we're looking for customers, we're looking for companies, that are investing in digital products, which is a pretty wide market. It sounds kind of funny saying it out loud. But in terms of the
sectorally, sectorally, where are your focus areas?
Yeah, so we work a lot. If we take a look at like our customer base, just as a barometer, we do very well in the fintech space. We do very well in e-commerce. We work really well with on-demand apps, so delivery, things like that. And of course, media, right? People are trying to understand, how to, potentially even break away from ad models into subscription models. So there's a lot of really interesting, sectors that we work with.
And could you share some insights in terms of success stories, how customers have actually used Amplitude for insights that have then helped them to maximize their business outcomes or launch new products?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really good example of that is Traveloka, right? And especially because Traveloka experienced a huge change in their business environment when the pandemic hit, right? And so we were helping them understand how to build products. And then pandemic came and everything changed, right? And they had to figure out, how do we make a transition? What should we be focusing our engineering time? Where should we be spending our money, right? And how do we do that more efficiently? And so what Amplitude enabled them to do is to be able to understand how behaviors or how customers were behaving within the app and what they should actually start to build, right? So moving from just, okay, let me help find a flight because there's no flights anymore, to maybe I can help them find a digital experience. Maybe we can't bring them to another country, but maybe we can, do some sort of online virtual experience. And how do we actually, get that into the hands of our consumers? And so, what we played a part in is that, we help get that data into the hands of the product and marketing teams very quickly. So a lot of companies have spent the past, 5-10 years collecting data, but it's almost like noise. They have so much data, and some of it's locked away, some of it's hard to get to, some of it you need to be a data scientist to even make sense out of. And the problem is that these decisions need to be made like that, right? Especially when you have changing environments or competitive environments, which we all are in, right? And so you can't wait weeks, months for reports or data science teams to find correlations. You need to be able to get this information into your hands. And it's not just a dashboard that just shows you a number. It really is needing to help you understand the insights and the whys behind what those numbers are showing you. So that way, what you're able to do is to act faster, be more responsive, and ultimately be more competitive, especially since everybody else now is building, these digital products. Whether Traveloka is trying to do it, everybody else is also trying to figure out how to do this. And so one of the nice things, and I think they've been a great success story, and you can see their business rebounding now very strongly. We were able to help them navigate a pretty incredible, unprecedented time, really.
So these are basically around your product intelligence solutions, correct? So how has the user preference and expectations for digital products changed during and now after the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, digital product experiences, right now, customers are demanding very good experiences. And the reason why is because it's very easy to switch, right? And especially if you start thinking about digital apps, right? Like if I go to your website and then I go to somebody else's website, I can go right back to your website. But if I download your app, I have a bad experience and I uninstall your app, it is extremely low likelihood that I will ever install your app again. Like it's almost non-existent, right? And so this is such a huge problem for companies. And this goes back to the question you had earlier around, we're spending all this money on acquisition, or the comment on all this acquisition. If you're not actually delivering value and a good experience to these customers, they're gonna switch. And because the pandemic accelerated everybody's investments in digital products, everybody has a digital product now, right? And if you're talking to a company, they are absolutely trying to figure out how to make the best experience possible. And then the other interesting thing about digital products versus physical goods is that you're not just competing against like another bank or another media company, you're competing against every other app on the phone, right? If I'm sitting in the back of my car on my way to work or whatever, like I've got a short amount of time. whatever I decide to spend my time on my phone, it's not just necessarily like, this media company versus that media company. It could be a video game versus media company, or it could be checking news versus, social networks or whatever. So you're kind of competing against all these people, and you're competing against, the Facebooks, the Googles, and things like that, for their attention, even if you're in a different industry. So you have to develop a really rich experience to capture the imagination and the hearts and minds of your consumers.
So because of your macro view on things, since you provide these solutions, what digital products do you see are poised to get greater traction post-pandemic? As you said, you've just said expectations have gone up dramatically.
Yeah.
So where are the sweet spots and the white spaces and opportunities?
Yeah, I think that honestly, there's been a couple of things from the pandemic that we didn't necessarily expect. And like one of those is that restaurants and bars and things like that no longer give you physical menus, right? They're giving you digital menus, right? And that itself can either be a really good experience or a very frustrating experience, right? And so, there's a very interesting space there that I think people that are in the food delivery industry or people that are in that restaurant space, there's an opportunity, and there's a lot of companies that are trying to attack that, but I think there's some interesting opportunities there. Obviously, fintech is another one. I think access to capital markets is a net positive for humanity, and I think that we're seeing more interest and more drive towards that, especially with the crazy ups and downs of what happened during the pandemic. And even with things now, like you look at the markets the way they are today with the volatility, people are still wanting to understand it, right? And so even if they're not actively trading, they're consuming more content around it, trying to actively understand what's going on around them. So I think fintech still plays a huge part, and particularly in Southeast Asia, where there's still a large unbanked population, there's an opportunity to be able to be that that force for good and that force for change. And this also goes with payroll and contract work. Contract work is more prevalent than ever. Whether you are a Grab driver, a Gojek driver, whatever. Sometimes you're all three and Deliveroo and whatnot, right? And so, like, how do you manage your own time? I think there's going to be some interesting spaces where people are going to want to manage their paychecks, their time, their banking. So there's definitely, I'm a big believer in that banking and fintech space.
Julio, Amplitude has recently announced that it's just launched its Amplitude customer data platform. Now, you claim to be the first ever insights-driven customer data platform. But let's take a step back and define what is a customer data platform.
Yeah, so a customer data platform allows product and marketing teams to connect lots of different data sources very easily in order to bring them into a centralized location to then be able to act upon it. We see a lot of companies struggling to get their data in one location, and there have been some businesses before that have tried to help with that.
But wouldn't that traditionally, Julio, be the CRM solution as the centerpiece of this?
So CRM solution has certain types of data, right? But there's other data that exists outside the CRM solution that we may need to know around, like product usage data. There may be other marketing data like attribution data that we don't necessarily bring into a CRM. We do bring in a lot of customer information into a CRM. So a CRM could be one of the things that we pull in to a customer data platform, as well as we connect with to make sure that both are synced up in real time. And a lot of companies have built pretty amazing businesses just connecting CRMs to data warehouses, to ads, things like that. But the reason why we say we're the first insights-driven CDP is that all those companies did was basically act like dumb pipes, right? Okay. All they were doing was being the highways. And then not only were they charging you for the highway, they were also charging you for the cars on the highway, right? And you didn't really get much out of it, right? Other than just connecting things. But that's how big connecting things is a problem. And so what we're doing is we're taking a step beyond that. And we're saying, hey, good, don't just collect this, but actually use it to drive insight, right? Use it to drive analysis, to understand how customers are behaving within your products. And then utilize that intelligence to then connect to like a marketing tool, maybe your ads, maybe, push notifications or email or whatnot. And so really what we want to be able to do is to collect the data and then act as the brains to make it more intelligent. And so we're very excited about the CDP. The customers that we've spoken to are extremely excited. And even people that don't work with us, this is squarely where they're thinking about. Like we were in some dinners recently, because the world's back open, down in Sydney. And I was speaking with, a couple of chief data officers of some very, large, well-known telecoms. And this was like tier one thing they were thinking is like, okay, I've collected all this data. I've got a great infrastructure, but my marketing, my product teams keep complaining like, we don't get this. Where is this? We need this. And so the work that they're doing isn't actually getting down to the business decision makers, right? So the people that are actually making, marketing, business, and product decisions. And so what we're going to be able to do, and what we're doing now for customers that have signed up for it, is making that data much more accessible, and making it so that you're able to have it at your fingertips in real time and be able to draw insights to drive action out of.
Okay, then how does your customer data platform then unlock some new revenue opportunities? Because what you just said is very interesting. You talked to some chief data officers in the telco space. They're not getting the right data to the right people, but I'm sure that the right data also gives new revenue insights.
Absolutely. So a lot of what people want to do is to understand leading indicators of success metrics. So those could be leading indicators of like revenue, right? And there's a couple of ways you do that. One is you get a data scientist to just pour through data and say, okay, we looked at some things that look like it's correlated to this outcome. Or you do customer research, right? So you have extremely qualitative, unscalable customer research, right? And then you have sort of in a vacuum, mathematics, right? And what we're doing is we're bringing that together, where essentially at scale, we're able to unlock what behaviors customers are doing that are correlated to outcomes. And not just outcomes like, okay, did they buy? Did they convert? Did they click on this button? But more important outcomes like, hey, what is the lifetime value of this customer? And what are the things that they do different than people that have a lower lifetime value? And you start to see that spread. And when you see that spread in terms of the behaviors that your customers that spend the most money with you over time, compared to people that are actually maybe only buying one time or not buying at all, you start to understand a pattern, right, through Amplitude, where you can see, okay, we need to actually focus on getting our other users to start behaving and acting like this. What are some, new flows we can give them from a product standpoint? Or what are some new market messages that we can give them? Maybe there's an area of our app that people don't know about, but once you get there, people really, really stick with your app for a long time. So these are the things that we're trying to get people to focus on, is to move away from sort of the vanity, superficial clicks, page view world, and start getting into what is actually driving revenue, and not just one time, but what is actually driving lifetime value. And I think that that is the paradigm shift that like an Amazon took, right, years ago, that now we're putting into the hands of everybody here in Asia.
And so, Julio, this is interesting. Just think back to earlier in our conversation around customer acquisition costs and how this then relates to lifetime value. You start the analytics that you provide then really give insights into where you really need to spend the dollars to get those profile of customers who then have a large lifetime value to the company.
Exactly. And we just launched our marketing analytics as well, too, at our user conference, Amplify in Las Vegas. So part of the journey for us as a digital optimization system is, to really help that end-to-end visibility like you just described. So if I know what works best in my product and I can understand what those users look like, how do I go get more of those? Where are they coming from? What are the right channels? How do we make sure that our marketing team is bringing us good customers, not bad customers, right? And that's the name of the game. And it used to be the way companies did this was through buying and selling data on the market, which now we're starting to realize there's a lot of perils to that. Privacy, ethics, so many concerns, right? And so what we're now enabling people to do is to not have to rely on third-party, ad information or third-party, data that could be sensitive, but actually just look at how people are using their own product, right? And saying like, hey, look, based on my own customers and how they're using it, I'm basically understanding how to better serve them, right? So it's a pretty exciting time, and I think it's going to be an absolute game changer for companies. And we've seen the Atlassians, the Canvas, the people that have adopted our product, but also this philosophy really exponentially grow faster than everybody else.
Now, Julio, I want to now zoom in on you because you've had very interesting background. You were a professional ballet dancer for a while. What was that like, and how did that shape you as an individual?
Yeah, I definitely think it's not the typical thing to go from professional ballet dancers into tech or into business. But I think there were some really interesting lessons that I learned along the way. I think number one is what does it take to compete at the highest level, right? Like when you want to do something and you want to be the best at it, you have to be very disciplined, you have to sacrifice, and you have to actually have a mindset that allows you to be coached and to grow. And so when I think about what has been unique about, my background has been to take that mindset of like, hey, learn as much as you can, grow as much as you can, and really take that growth mindset and apply it to my life. It's allowed me to, make some pivots and some changes, but to always be very curious and thirsty for the next thing, right? And to never think you know everything or that you're the expert, but you're constantly a student, right? And I think that is something that, something like a classical art, particularly if you're dancing, at the highest levels of that art, like I was, then you're able to do, I think, magical things. And what's interesting is that one of the core values of Amplitude, so we have 3 values: humility, ownership, and growth mindset. That growth mindset one, I think, is extremely important. And when I talk to executives, and as you get older, right, it becomes a little bit harder to kind of keep that up because you're like, yeah, but I already kind of know what's going to happen because I've seen it before. But you kind of always have to have that, that learner's mindset when you're going into new markets, new territories, new products, because there may be some things, and it's always important to have a strong point of view, but you need to be able to very quickly understand, is there better data or a better way to go about it, and to not think that you are always going to be right, but instead really try to listen and learn and adapt. And I think it's a great life lesson. I was lucky enough to learn that growing up and into my early 20s, and I think it's been able to help my career as I've gone beyond that.
Yeah, so because interestingly, then post professional ballet dancer, you've done everything from helping startups to grow from less than 10 people to proven market leaders. You've built revenue organizations, different stages, pre-series A, listing as a company like Amplitude. So You've done a lot. Tell us about those lessons, because a lot of our audience are either business owners or run very large corporations, and your insights would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple things that are very, very important to me. And when I think about, going into a market, and then how to attack that and then eventually scale it. So there's a couple of principles I have. So first, in the beginning, you have to do unscalable things to scale, right? And I think sometimes you have operators that come from larger organizations that then try to launch a new product or to enter a new market or to start their own startup or join an early stage startup. And they immediately start building a lot of operational processes and things that they felt used to that they needed at the time. The issue is that when you're in a very small stage, you actually cannot afford some of that overhead. You can't afford some of that tax, right? Because most of the assumptions you have in the beginning are probably going to be wrong. I mean, if you are 90% accurate with all the decisions you're making at a very early stage company, then wow, I need to know your name and let's go invest together, right? Yeah. But a lot of it is really going in with a point of view, creating a baseline, and then trying to test that as much as possible. So if we have an assumption on a particular market and we think it's going to behave in a certain way, that's totally fine. I'm not saying don't have an assumption, go in and let's test it. And let's be quick to change that if we need to very early on. So that way we can make sure that we are, continuously growing. And then as we start to get signal from noise, we start to see, oh, there's patterns. Okay, great. We start to crystallize certain parts of the organization. that's when you really start getting leverage from those operational processes. And so I think that's a very important thing. In a lot of times what I see is people skip that step of earning the right to scale. They just try to scale right away in the very beginning. And that can be, very dangerous. And so I think that, it's an interesting time right now because, we've now got people that have had these types of experiences similar to what I've had, where they've seen seed stage through listing and, they kind of understand the different stages. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, that just didn't exist. Either you were somebody who just didn't know what they were doing, but very passionate, right? Like startup person, or you had someone that came from Oracle or Siebel or something that just was used to very, very large technology companies and hadn't seen it. So now we're seeing kind of also a shift in talent, right? And if you want to attract that talent, again, they're going to be open. They're going to be more open to opportunities where it feels like they have the leeway to make those mistakes, as long as they, are able to, test and iterate their way out of it. And so I know I talked about a lot of different things, happy to double down on anything. But again, it's earn the right to scale, create baselines, test them aggressively, and always make sure that, you're open and willing to learn.
Now, Julio, I think we could do another half an hour of this, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But if you want to leave the audience with some final thoughts, what would you say?
Final thoughts on the startup stuff or the Amplitude? Where would you like me to go?
Anything you want to do, anything you want to do.
Yeah, I think, to put it all together, I think we're in a very unique time, right? There's obviously some macro volatility that has people, starting to wonder what the future is going to be like. And the future is going to be different, right? But at the same time, we do see this come in cycles, and there are some important trends. And one of the important trends that we saw get kicked off is that digital products are the future. And so no matter what ends up happening, we're going to continue to see the growth of digital products in our lives. And so it's a really exciting opportunity, I think, from a business level to understand what that means for your business, from an executive level, how do I actually operate in these environments, and how do I double down on some of these things, to an individual level in terms of learning new skills and or being able to apply what they know, probably in unique ways that didn't exist before. So I think that anytime you start to see these crises or these volatilities, it's also time for opportunity. And I'm very excited to kind of see this next stage. It may take us some time, but one thing's clear is that digital products are going to be the future of humanity.
Now, Julio, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Julio Bermúdez, the Vice President of Asia Pacific at Amplitude, on BizTech's Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thanks again for tuning in.